Hey everyone, it's Sarah De Silva here again. Today I am here with my little pup having a nap in the background on this fine sunny afternoon to talk to you about why it's important to take note of who you're taking advice from in your healing journey, and also why it's really important to do your research about the kinds of therapists that you're taking on in your healing journey, because some of them may not have any clue what they're dealing with, especially if it's coming across narcissistic abuse or abuse in general. And especially when it's dealing with tough situations or relationships like parental and child relationships. Because sometimes therapists can be very gaslighty, or they may not understand the depth of what you're really going through, and they can kind of engage in behavior that makes you feel like you're back at square one, and you're backed into a corner, kind of feeling like you need to go back into an abusive situation. So that's why I thought that this was a really important topic to talk about today, because it's kind of one of the first stepping stones that we go through when we realize that we've experienced all of this abuse for so long, and then finally take that first step to go and find a healer or a therapist or someone who's going to support us through the journey. And then unfortunately, sometimes we're met with very traumatic experiences in the healing circle, that either make us engage in behavior that we don't want to engage in, or re-traumatize us, or actually induce new types of trauma. So one example for myself was when I was for the first time addressing some of the abuse that I had gone through when I was a child, and it was abuse of a sexual nature. And I immediately was met in my very first session with this therapist, who had no idea about much of what I had been through. I had only told them that this is why I had come here to talk about that. And the first thing that they told me was that I needed to go to the police. Now, for someone who is like, this is the first time I'm bringing this up, I was probably like, I think I was maybe 27 or so at the time. This is very, very traumatic, especially because I'd been going through other things at the time as well. I was very scared. I was like, that was not my intention for coming here. It was to address how I was feeling, and, to address the trauma that's made me really sick and given me anxiety and really affected my life for such a long time. And now you're telling me to go directly to the police. I left that session shaking, crying, calling my partner, saying that was a horrible experience, feeling extremely scared because they knew my information. They knew the name of the person. I was like even paranoid that they were going to send it to the police themselves. So that itself put me back a few steps in my healing process, because I was like, what am I going to do? I'm so scared. I regret coming forward with this and saying what I had experienced, because I didn't think that this was going to happen in the health sphere. Now, this is a perfect example of someone who has no idea what they're doing. And this was someone who was under a very well-known clinical psychologist in Sydney. And I actually didn't put through a complaint because I was so flabbergasted and I just didn't want to deal with it because of all the things that I was going through. But I intend on putting through a complaint with the evidence that this person really didn't care. They told me that they were going to refer me to someone else. They didn't refer me to that person. When I contacted them about the referral, they said, sorry, I've been busy. And here you go, if you want to have a try. And I was just like, I don't know what to do now. I felt lost and afraid and alone. And what I did instead was turn to the community. I turned to other people who had experienced what I had experienced. And that was where I started to find some healing and support. It's hard in this journey to have that experience and then decide to pick up again and go forward and try again. But I did eventually find a proper therapist who was able to deal with my experience. And this person immediately justified and validated to me that this was in no way about persecuting this person. It was about healing myself. And if and when it was time to do that, then I could choose to do that. And that was the beginning of my healing journey, feeling safe for the first time in my life, feeling like this person, I could trust them to keep my secret, because it was a secret for my entire life, but also to facilitate my feelings that were coming up around everything that I'd experienced up until then, and then also help me to heal after the fact. That was an amazing journey, and I am going to praise that therapist forever. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to that therapist. But it's really important in this healing journey to pay attention to who you're getting help and advice from, because sometimes when you've never done anything like this before, you might go into a situation like this thinking this is right. But follow your gut and follow your intuition and follow what are the intentions for you going into this in the first place. Because if your intentions were to heal, then follow your gut if that's not the experience that you're getting. If your intention was to persecute that person, then maybe that therapist would have been fine for me, but at the time it wasn't. So the next step is to also pay attention to, if you're dealing with someone who is abusive or narcissistic, and you know that they're quite narcissistic, is to, when you get into the therapist's office or into the healing sphere, it's important to ask them, do you know what narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder is? Do you know how that affects relationships? Do you know how that affects families? And do you know how the little games and the manipulations that they play, do you know how that all works? Because if they don't know how it works, you can respectfully back out and say, I'm sorry, but I just need to look for someone else who can help me with that. Because that person should always respectfully also say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this issue. I don't have the expertise or the knowledge to help you with that problem. Find someone who knows what they're talking about. It is so important, because when you go into that situation, and I'm going to give the perfect example, I've come across so many healers in my life. And even in the coaching sphere, when I became a coach, I came across healers in that area as well. And it's still happening today, where a healer doesn't understand what you have come from. You might start explaining something to them. They only have a small amount of exposure to you and your experience. Maybe you don't yet understand what you're going through. For example, you don't even know it's narcissism yet. And they start to invalidate or minimize your experience by saying you need to forgive them, you need to move on, you need to think of them like they're a good person, you need to see them for who they really are, you need to see that they were always doing their best, or whatever it was, especially when it comes to a parent. I've seen a lot of healers say that, all parents are doing their best with what they have. And it's really invalidating to a child of abuse who knows that their parents were not doing that. It's really, really hard, because how do you find someone who can validate that you felt that way, but also heal, and then also establish a trustworthy connection enough to be able to help you reason and talk through a situation like wanting to connect with the abuser again? Because that's what going to want to come up when you are healing, especially in, say, for example, my own situation with my parent. There have been many times where I've been to healers and asked them to address the situation with my parent. I've been asked to forgive my parent. I've been asked to see it from their perspective. I've been asked to see that they were doing the best with what they had. And that's all great and well, because I can see some of that too, definitely. But at the same time, I can see that they, when confronted, have never wanted to validate my concerns. They also don't have enough emotional intelligence to deal with the fact that they weren't able to provide those things at the time. And that's okay if they can establish that they weren't able to provide those things at the time, but now address that they want to try now. But when you're met with a parent who still, after the healing process, doesn't want to validate that, who completely denies and reverses the victim and offender, goes into that whole manipulative tactic and the cycle of abuse, all those tactics put together, it's really invalidating for the person to go back to that person and try to make amends again, especially when a therapist is telling them that you need to keep trying, you need to keep going back, you need to try better and try and be better and do this and do that. And it's really important when you're going into this healing sphere, if you know you're dealing with a narcissist, don't go to therapy with a person that the narcissist has chosen. Do not go to therapy with the narcissist. The therapy is only for you. They're like, if a person is truly a narcissist, even in therapy, there is no way they're going to admit to what they have done. They are only there to prove that you have done worse. So there is absolutely no point in trying to make amends in this situation when you're dealing with a true abuser, because all they want is to regain their power, because you being weak in this situation means you can't make your own decisions, means that you feel uncertain, means that you feel lesser than, and you have low self-esteem. That means it's an open doorway for them to come in and give all of those things that you don't have. Like, create the sense of control that you don't have, create the sense of knowing more than you, so they're able to make those decisions for you. So really pay attention to the bias that is involved when it comes into this narcissistic or abusive sphere, where, say you're trying to make a negotiation in a relationship where someone's been abusive and you're asking them to come to therapy, and they're saying, yes, well, I'm going to choose the therapist, I know a person. Don't allow this to happen, because this is how they gain control of the situation, especially when that person may be saying things to this person that are manipulating them against you, putting you in the position that you're actually trying to get help from. So it's really important to remember, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I hate to be the person that says negative things here, Oh, someone's having a nice little stretch there in the background. So just pay attention to the pup while I say the bad news, that unfortunately, sometimes people are not doing their best. Unfortunately, abusers are out to hurt you and harm you. Unfortunately, they are trying to gain a sense of power from your unfortunate situation, or whatever it is. So what's really important here is to create as much distance as you can from that abusive situation and the people around them, not only the abuser, but the people around them as well. And then get therapy and help from someone who understands what this dynamic is, the abusive dynamic, who understands trauma, CPTSD, the covert and overt styles of abuse, and narcissism, and how it's really important to be maintaining no contact and there's no justification for a time where you shouldn't be maintaining no contact. There have been many a times with my current therapist where I've said, maybe it's time, maybe it's time for me to start making amends. Maybe it's been long enough now, maybe I've done enough healing. Maybe they've changed too. And my therapist has always reminded me that unless they're coming to me and telling me that they can see what they have done, there's no way that me going to them is going to ever do what I need. So the healing is always focused on myself. The healing is always focused on me dealing with those emotions coming up of feeling crappy about not being able to have that kind of relationship in my life, and creating that relationship elsewhere, fulfilling those instincts and those feelings of love and desire for connection in other ways. And there's always going to be ways that are just as fulfilling. Trust me that even if a therapist or someone tries to tell you that that kind of relationship is irreplaceable, it's not irreplaceable. You can replace it in whatever way is best for you. Maybe that's with yourself, maybe that's with another person, but maybe it's by, if you have the mother wound, maybe it's by becoming a mother yourself, like me with my little puppy. That has filled my heart with so much love that has overflowed my heart and made my heart made me realize that my heart could never be empty. So why am I trying to go back to something that always wants to drain me and empty me of my love and my happiness? Because they're not feeling that sense of love and happiness within. Because that's where it deeply comes from, that narcissistic, abusive stuff. And under no circumstances should we ever feel responsible or guilt or shame or even feel sad for them, pitiful for them, because they know how sad they feel inside, and they have every opportunity to look at the things that are wrong in their lives and try to make a change to make it better. But what they do is instead they scapegoat everyone and they say that everyone else is the problem. So they will never, ever see, if you ask them to come to therapy or if you establish that you're doing therapy, they're only going to say it's because you were the problem in the first place. So it's really important to remember that they cannot have free-thinking people, free-thinking minds in their lives, abusers and narcissists. So when you come to the point of wanting to heal, keep it to yourself. Keep it away from this person who can influence it. It's best not even tell them that you think that they're a narcissist. It's best to just keep yourself separate from anything involving them from now on. And, my therapist will tell me it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. Every time I think it's a good idea to go back, my therapist reminds me why it's not a good idea. So a good therapist in this situation who understands narcissistic personality disorder and the dynamic that's going on, if you've explained this dynamic and they've been able to identify it, and they've been able to go as far as to tell you that going no contact with this person is a good idea, then believe them. And whenever you feel the need to go and establish contact again, go to the therapist first, and they will remind you and talk you through all those feelings and thoughts you're having and remind you why all of those feelings and thoughts are just projections of your own kindness inside. They're projections of your own hope for the future. But when you ultimately go into that situation, you get met with this shock and you feel appalled at the response that you're getting, because you had so much hope for how it was going to turn out, and it ended up turning out exactly the same way it did before. That's because we can forgive these people. We can. It's all good and well to forgive them. It's all good and well to say that they were doing the best with what they had in order to feel good inside. But that doesn't mean having them in your life sometimes. That doesn't mean forcing yourself to put yourself into a situation that feels uncomfortable because it seems right according to this person. Even if you're with a therapist who tells you something, whatever it may be, that makes you feel uncomfortable, trust your own feelings first. No person can have authority over your feelings before you. And in a dynamic with a narcissistic person, they've been trying to tell you how you feel. They've been gaslighting you and telling you what's right for you this whole time. But now that you're coming into this healing journey, it's very, very important to now take that choice back. And if something doesn't feel right, even in the healing sphere, don't go ahead with it. Now, we're not talking about discomfort in sitting with those feelings sometimes when we're feeling uncomfortable and, we're kind of like, there's exposure therapy, which is amazing, like exposing ourselves to phobias and things like that, which are very, very beneficial. I can even say for myself, by exposing myself to being sick, I'm no longer afraid of being sick. And that was a major fear for me before. And that was by overcoming a massive hurdle for me by overcoming that sickness. But we're talking about interventions or things that people trying to tell you or make you feel or make you see that you don't feel are right deep down. Always trust your intuition in this sense. And there's no problem in moving away from a therapist or a healer that doesn't feel right for you and going and finding someone else. So I like to use this analogy, right? So if you go out and do all this work and you want to go back and make amends, or you want to go and talk to them and try and establish a relationship. And this is especially if you have a parent wound, where you have the narcissistic parent dynamic going on and you feel like maybe it's time to go back to my parent and say, hey, let's try and talk through all those problems. The analogy that I like to use is, imagine therapy was like you went and got a spray tan, right? Ready for summer. You got this beautiful spray tan. You were looking fabulous and fine. And that was going to therapy. And then you decided to go against all of the advice of therapy and go and maintain contact with the abuser again. It's like sinking yourself into a bubble bath after having a spray tan. It's going to wash everything literally away. So it's really important to remember that you're building up this good work with the therapy. And if you get the advice not to establish contact with this person, there's probably a good reason why. And if this healer or therapist is giving you advice that goes against what you feel is right, then trust that. Trust that, and don't wash off the fake tan, all the hard work you've been doing, by going against what feels right, okay? Because we're going back into an environment that's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for any dynamic in any part of your life. Your life is better without that dynamic. And the more you keep yourself out, the more you maintain that beautiful tan all summer long, as the analogy says. So remember that you can be gaslit just as much by a therapist or a healer as much as you can be gaslit by the abuser or the narcissist. So remember that in this healing sphere to always, or in this healing journey rather, to always trust your intuition and trust what feels right to you. And for me, on my personal healing journey, understanding that going to the community and speaking to the community and seeing that they told me that going no contact was the best idea, I trusted that because so many people were saying that was the right idea. So I went no contact. But then I found the right healer for myself. And then I was able to go to that healer and say, you know what, I'm having these feelings about going and making amends and starting to establish some sort of relationship again. And I start to unpack why and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to say. And this therapist asks me enough questions to establish, well, what is the reason for that? Because this person hasn't given me any signs that they want that either. So it's helped me to rationalize and bring logic to my thinking, which is projecting my own kind feelings onto others, which I tend to do a lot. And I know a lot of people pleasers do too. So remember, sometimes we're projecting. Sometimes we need to listen more to our intuition. Sometimes we need to pay attention to how many people we're taking advice from and how many people we're actually asking for advice. Because if it's too many, we're going to get very clouded by ideas. So find someone that you can trust and go to them, like a therapist. And maybe you'll have one or two that you go to, and that's totally fine if you have more than one. But if we're starting to go all over the place, it's kind of like we're not going to be able to make enough of a decision that comes from our own intuition. And in this healing sphere where you've been abused or manipulated or had a narcissist telling you how you think and feel and how you should be, because you won't be valid if not, it's really important in this healing journey to start to listen back to yourself and your own intuition, because that's where you're going to start to gain your sense of identity again, who you really are, who you once were. Bring all of that back. So remember to make your own decisions and trust yourself on this healing journey, just like what I mentioned at the beginning with my metaphor of, it was a true story for me, but a metaphor for you, that as soon as I felt like something wasn't right with this therapist, I left. And when I told my new therapist about it, they told me that what I did was the right thing and that it was indeed about my own healing journey specifically, rather than going and doing what that therapist thought was right at the time. So I hope you found value from this video today on basically just why it's really important to pay attention to how many people you're taking advice from and who they are. And to listen to your own intuition, the importance of it, listening to your own intuition when it comes to narcissistic abuse, because it is terrifying and it breaks down your sense of self and your sense of self-esteem and confidence. And it's really important to know that you're not alone on this journey, that I myself am a survivor, but by, teaching what I've learned in my healing journey, not only the people in my environment have they healed and learned and been able to grow, it's also grown my relationships. And then seeing my clients have the same responses in their environment is just so fulfilling, because I know that this stuff works. And this kind of advice that I am giving, and which you'll hear from a lot of other healers in the same sphere of narcissistic abuse, is very valuable, because like I said, that not a lot of therapists are well versed on narcissistic personality disorder and the help that we require when it comes to healing. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. Otherwise, please stay tuned. I'll be posting a video once a week from now on.